Hello and welcome back to the Innovate Eco podcast. I'm your host, Rob Brugglesworth, and this is the podcast where I seek out and interview founders who are building planet positive businesses to tackle one of the many environmental challenges that we face. If you're new here, then that's the concept of the podcast. And also now, in addition to that, I have decided to put my money where my mouth is and build my own planet positive business. And I'm doing that kind of as transparently as I can on this channel and elsewhere. So do have a look back through the episodes. You'll notice there's some that are, there's the main episodes with the numbers, and then there's some that are titled The Startup Diaries, which is where myself and my brother Matt are openly building our business, No Longer Known, which is a planet positive fashion brand. There's a lot more to it than that. So do have a listen, or go to nolongerknown.com if you want to find out more about that. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention that at the start if you weren't already aware. But on the main podcast, as I said, interviewing founders to try and inspire you if you're already building your own planet positive business, or maybe you're thinking about it, or it's something that you can do one day, because we need as many people working on solutions as possible and not just talking about problems. On that note, today's episode, I'm speaking with Jon Conradi, who is the founder of the company Wild Mosaic. Now, Wild Mosaic are tackling a problem that we've come across many times on the podcast before. That's the biodiversity crisis and the gradual loss of what Jonn himself and Wild Mosaic call wildness. Wildness in our lives, but wildness in our surroundings as well. And he's based in the UK, and in the UK we've lost sort of 90%, some estimates say, of our biodiversity over the last 100 years or even less. So bringing that back is a real challenge, and there's many different complex elements to that, but often it can feel like something that's quite inaccessible to many people. You can feel like you need to own land, buy land, you need to go out and plant trees, whatever it might be. But Jonn is trying to create an easy and frictionless way to do that through his subscription platform at Wild Mosaic, where people can sign up to a monthly or yearly subscription and you will get a tile, and that is your contribution to a nature restoration or rewilding project. Jonn is building this from the ground up, and in this episode we get into all of that and many more things. We cover like how Jonn didn't start out in ecology, is not an ecologist, and how he was kind of struggled with not feeling part of that community at first, but how that's actually been a bit of a superpower for him, and how he turned a kind of disillusionment with environmental news and switching off from all these problems, similar to something I faced myself, and I'm sure many of you have as well, how he turned that into action by building this business. We talk about how a moment of redundancy was the spark of the what made him finally start the business. We talk about what it really takes to build a social enterprise when you're not a natural self-promoter. If you're a bit of an introvert, that's definitely something I can relate to as well. The illusion of wildness in the UK, and why many of us are disconnected from what that is and the challenge that brings with it, and why Jonn believes businesses like ecosystems should eventually die well, leaving behind richness, not ruin. So that's an interesting one. And we dig into some of Jonn's writing over the years. He does some really interesting, thoughtful writing on his blog, as well as he actually has a philosophy background. So a nice merging of worlds. So I found this episode really interesting, lots of fun to chat through with Jonn as he builds this business, and his other insights into rewilding and this challenge that we face of biodiversity loss. So I hope you enjoy it. I'll be back at the end with a few more notes, but without further ado, here is my interview with Jon Conradi from Wild Mosaic. So, hi Jonn, great to have you on the podcast. I've been excited to chat to you for a while now.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Really excited to be here.
And the reason I've been excited is, I guess, the reason I started this podcast at the start was to try and inspire other people to build businesses and to tackle these plethora of environmental challenges that we face. And I think your journey in particular is an interesting one, because I was looking back through some of your blog posts and some of your posts on LinkedIn around building this business, Wild Mosaic, and noticed some posts you did early on around how you'd switched off from environmental news, which was something I can relate to, because that's pretty much where I was at when I started this podcast and thought I need to do something proactive because I was not feeling very positive about things. So I could relate to that. And then also, interestingly, you saying how you felt like a bit of an outsider in terms of the nature community, and that I just thought, those two things, and then deciding to go on and found a business that's maybe, a little bit out of your comfort zone, for a better word, it was really exciting and interesting, and an interesting case study to talk about on this episode. So that's what I want to get into today, along with lots of other things. So yeah, just starting on that point, really, I'd love to know a little bit more around how you finally made that decision to turn that switching off from environmental news and that kind of feeling like a bit of an outsider on the nature side of things, and decided to turn that into doing something a bit more proactive and launching Wild Mosaic.
So I sort of I discovered Rewilding, which is what brought me back into engagement with environmental news and wilder life. I think I always had that interest. That sense of being able to look outside, see interactions and different wildness as a way of sort of learning and understanding the world. It's always been really profound and meaningful for me. And then sort of I grew up in a time where, we fixed the ozone layer, we phased out CFCs, we tackled acid rain. It was just like, oh, okay, so now we have this climate change stuff and biodiversity loss. The grown-ups will fix it. And then came the slow realisation that wasn't happening at all, and more species were sort of blinking out of existence and no one even really seemed to care. And that really felt quite heavy, disengaged me completely. But it always was there, that interest. And I was working in a business school but wanted to learn more again. And so did a distance learning course on biodiversity conservation and management. I was a bad student at university. I did philosophy and politics and spent most of my time thinking about philosophy and not writing essays or doing work. So I thought, I've grown up now, so I will now be a diligent student, and that will be easy. This course was a distance learning course, so they sent me all the material at the beginning of the year, and then I had an exam at the end of the year. And yes, I hadn't turned into a diligent student. I found that awful and ended up not doing a master's as I wanted to, and sort of escaped 5 years later with like a certificate in postgraduate certificate. So then I still wanted to do it, so I wanted to try it again, but then was more aware that I needed to think about who I am and how I learn, and discovered the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales, where you go for a week and study in this incredible place. And I sort of discovered rewilding there. So firstly, they have rewilded what was an old slate mine. They've turned it back into life. There's wildness, there's new growth, and also rewilded it and repopulated it with people, an education centre and so on. I being able to learn about rewilding in that place, have that sort of blend of theory and practice, it was just incredible. It made me feel that anything is possible. So that was really formative, but I still didn't have the idea then. It was more, wow, rewilding sounds really nice, but it's a niche thing. If you happen to have a few hundred acres of land, it's a nice thing to do. Then you can wait 20 years and tell a story about it. But otherwise, it's largely impractical. So I then was, a few years later, made redundant, which turned out to be quite a good thing. So I'd taken 6 months off to look after my son, who had just been born. And I wanted to take a year, but I couldn't afford a year career break. I could afford 6 months career break. Came back, it was COVID. They made a whole load of people redundant. I was one of them, which was obviously in a lot of ways devastating, but in other ways it meant that I could now fund a year off to look after my son, which was great. And I wanted to get more into social innovation. It was an area that was fascinating to me, but full of words that I didn't understand and concepts that I just felt like an alien around. And so did a course called Year Here, which was really great. So it had a third where you work in a social innovation, a third where you consult to an organisation doing social innovation, and a third where you set up a venture yourself. And I went into it knowing absolutely not, I was not going to start a business, because that would be ridiculous. I had a young son. It might be resonating with you.
Slightly,
it's not a sensible time to be starting a business. I'd just been made redundant. It was like, everything was in turmoil because of COVID. It was just a necessary thing I had to do. So when it got to that stage, I was going to do a business in retrofitting homes in London. seemed like a clear business case, seemed straightforward. I was not interested in it in the slightest, but it was just like an exercise I had to go through. And then me and a couple of friends from the course were sitting in a courtyard in London, and there was all this lavender and these bees buzzing around, and they were fascinated, and I started talking about rewilding and they were interested. And it just occurred to me that this had started to edge more closely into the mainstream and that there was potential for it. And if I wasn't going to try it now, then when? And so played with this idea of Wild Mosaic. It was a different name then, and a slightly different idea. But the core of it was there. And so it was like, okay, well, I'll take this step. And then that seemed to work and got people interested. And then there was another step and so on. And yeah, slowly, bit by bit, it sort of turned into a business. And yeah, I'm sort of like along for the ride.
Yeah, I can definitely sympathise with the point around trying to build with a young child. I think it's interesting the amount of people I've had on the podcast that has been the catalyst, and I guess it's either that or being made redundant or being fired from a job seem to be the two common threads that come through, which is it shows maybe that people have things bubbling away in their mind, and it takes an event to make them go, you know what, time's ticking away, I need to do this now. And the horrible irony of it, I guess, in a way, is that it is at that time when you're the most busy, but it just seems to be a common theme.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something about like everything being shaken up, so you sort of like, well, if all of these other assumptions I've been holding all along are wrong, maybe this assumption is also wrong, so let's try and do something about it.
And on that point of held assumptions, you've challenged in your business and in your writing this idea that some people, the UK is wild, and the way that a lot of people view the current UK landscape is a little bit of an illusion. And I was intrigued to dig into that a little bit, of people that are listening who maybe are aware that nature's in decline, but perhaps from a UK context anyway, not quite tuned into just how bleak things are. And then I guess on top of that, interested to your feeling around coming from maybe a bit more from the outside, what that brought, what extra insights that brought in terms of being able to connect with people who aren't within the bubble, as it were. They're already converted, the conservation bubble.
I never studied ecology, and I can't walk out and start naming things, and that makes me feel pretty inadequate. Or at least it did. I think I'm more accepting of that now. I remember studying biology as a AS level, and it was just not what I thought it would be. It wasn't about like the wonder of life and how it all interconnects. It's like, I don't know, I can't even remember bits of it. It was very detailed about very uninteresting things. But yeah, so I don't feel like I have that deep ecology, which can make me feel like an outsider. But I don't know. The more I talk to people, I don't think that actually matters. There's no area of ecology as well that you can't learn about, where other people will know significantly more, and you'll only learn about particular things. So
I was about to say exactly that. Like with anything, there's always someone that knows more. And
yeah, exactly. So sort of got over that a bit. I've forgotten the question.
Just around how that, I guess, bring that, like you've just described, did that bring any insights into how to connect with people more widely? And I guess just this point around, just before you get into that, just for context for people listening, like how big a problem is this in terms of what we face, I guess?
Yeah, the size of the problem is daunting. I think that before I got into it, I thought this was a problem that happened and is now being fixed. Whereas the reality is this is a problem that happened and is now getting worse. And that blows my mind a bit about just how much worse it's got. Like I was thinking, okay, we don't have the woodlands, we don't have the wildflower meadows, the things I did remember not having in my childhood. That's the real problem. And then the more I look, I see the things that I had in my childhood we don't have anymore. And it's this slow creep of what we consider normal, but just how much we've shifted our attention away from the outside to the inside. To the wilder world, to screens and humanness. I think I'm really struck by this idea of us as a lonely species, that we've just become stuck in humanness. Whereas in the past we were interconnected. There was a relationship you would have with the land, the life, the different things that would be part of you and your existence, and that's just completely stripped away. And that sense of our green and pleasant land, like we wander out and go into the countryside and it's beautiful. I think one of the side effects of studying this more is it spoils your walks in the country a little bit.
I've written a blog post on that exact topic, that you want to learn more and then you start to realize what's not there, and it can get quite depressing.
Yeah, you walk through these beautiful woods and then you notice this is quite quiet and all the trees are lined up. It's like, oh, okay, it's a plantation. That's why there's nothing alive in here. Or you look into those rolling hills of green and you realise, yeah, there's two species there, grass and sheep. So yeah, I think that is bleak. But the other side of it, and I think the side of it that I actually missed a bit before doing this, is there is still a huge amount of life and a huge amount of potential. We can bring it back, and it can come back quite quickly, but it's at a small scale to start with. So I started off using the sort of 3 metre by 3 metre what 3 word tiles. I use that as a way to bring people in as a personal piece. But what I've discovered through doing it is that when you're looking at that level, it's firstly related. So you can picture what 3 metres by 3 metres looks like. You can get down and see what's happening on that level in a way that 300 acres or 3,000 acres is very difficult to imagine unless you've really been out in those timescales for your lifetime. It's very difficult to actually imagine that. And when you're at that level, you start to see so much life. Like the amount of invertebrates that exist and the variety is just wonderful. Like what's that quote around beetles? Like there's this wonderful quote around, if there was a god, then he seemed to have an inordinate love for beetles, or something. It's something like that. It's written much better. It's really good. I'll try and find it and send it over, because it's a really good quote, which is much more eloquent than I put. But it basically just says there's a lot of life that we miss because we look at things at a human level, and at a human level, you know, the beavers, the wolves, these things are important and noticeable to us. But actually, a lot of life is under the soil, it's crawling around, it's just waiting to emerge, and it is just there. So yeah, I think coming at it from a slightly different perspective, coming at it from an angle where I can see quite clearly there's a gap between the science of it, the ecology of it, and the people that often go into this with a deep love of it, but then they then go into a very narrow field, and that need to sort of learn, how do you bring this back to people? The problem the problem is land, but if we rewilded everything and got everything back to a wild state, we would just start depleting it all again if we don't also tackle people. So that connection, how do you rebuild that connection between people and land and life, is for me central, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the disconnect, the challenge, you described it really well there. I think in the ecology community, there's this need, whether it's an ego thing or it comes from a place of science. I mean, I guess it's a bit of both, but like about scale and trying to do the biggest project and do things across countries and continents, which is obviously a great ambition, but you're completely right. There's so much we need to do on healing the human relationship with nature at a smaller scale first, that it almost becomes unrelatable then. And that's a big part of the problem, is that if I go tell someone they should be excited about something that's overseas and it's doing something at big scale, it's like, yeah, it's when you get it down to 3 by 3 meters or a smaller patch, it just becomes something that the human mind, because we're not great at imagining things at a global. You could apply this to politics, to various issues. You know, when we start to, as a species, look at things globally or even nationally, it doesn't really compute that well. So I think what you're trying to do of starting small and building from there, when you're talking about healing that connection and getting people to understand the challenge, but also we're a little bit impatient, aren't we? So being able to see things happen quickly, and that's what I think is really powerful about what you're doing at Wild Mosaic, is that, you know, people can feel that connection again, and they don't have to go and, you know, for ages, and I still do obsess about this. I'm like, well, the only way to do this is to save up enough money and potentially buy or lease a patch of land and do it that way. And then when I saw what you were doing, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's not, maybe it doesn't have to be like that. And maybe, although you can get into it a little bit more, but I know this is in the UK in particular, kind of land ownership, it's quite Yeah, it's quite difficult to say the least. There's a lot of competing interests in terms of what people want to do with land. So, yeah, I think it's a nice way to bring back that connectedness and feel a part of something immediately without having to go, oh God, how many years is it going to take me to save up land?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think time is a problem for us. I was talking to someone who just visited Nep, and she was quite struck how, in a lot of parts, how ugly it was. You know, like obviously you can take the nice photos of the wildflower meadow, you can take the nice scenic shots of the, you know, the pigs rummaging around, but in a lot of time, in a lot of places, it's basically just will look like a mess. I mean, she was talking about a field where it was mostly just ragwort, and it's sort of like a reminder how this is still early. 20 years is still early in that stage where you're still trying to get these pioneer species through. You're still trying to work out what the land wants to become.
Yeah.
And I think part of the joy of rewilding that is missed is that process of experimentation, of like transformation and change and seeing how things respond and don't respond, or seasonal change, but also yearly change. Like what happens in a year like this when it's super dry and super sunny? It's unusual. What happens in the like last year when it was super rainy? Like how does those variations affect it? And I think it's sort of bringing back that joy of experimentation unknown back into things,
which we've definitely lost from the countryside, you know, and farming. I don't blame farmers to some extent when they're pressured to get crops out on time in whatever weather conditions come their way. It's building back in that experimentation to how we look at land is tricky.
Absolutely. I mean, it's. I think that a lot of farmers are under a lot of pressure. I think it's difficult because farmer covers a very wide range of.
It could be anything.
Range. It is a lot of people who depend on the land, and we depend on for the land, are put under so much pressure that they have to just forcefully extract, and that doesn't help things. But it sets up some of these clashes, which I think often are largely false. When you talk about even the greatest aspirations of rewilding in the UK, it would end up with less land than currently used for golf courses.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we really were worried about food security, then maybe we should look at golf courses. Very fertile land, well located, good infrastructure, but obviously that's not what we're looking at. So yeah, the clash, a lot of the clashes that are presented about rewilding are largely false for very particular interests.
Yeah, we are, and that coming back to the disconnect, like getting people comfortable with messiness. It's interesting you say that if a friend visited Nep and their reaction was messy, because I think to me, the messier, the wilder. And I see messiness and I think that's going to be full of life most of the time. Whereas, if I have areas of my garden kind of go wild, and I know I can see in my parents' eyes sometimes, or whoever's visiting, you know, is that the best? You know, that looks a bit unkempt, and what are the neighbours going to say and stuff? There's still a challenge for sure.
Absolutely, I think that messiness, but also death. Death exists in a wilder context that is often unappealing to us. So, you know, the broken, fallen trees, the things that have disease, or things that aren't working, like that is also part of it. Sometimes those are some of the areas that need intervention, depending on the timescales you're working at and so on. But that is also part of a wilder landscape. And I think partly is sometimes what we see as messy is, you know, the things aren't dead-headed. They're not like neatly managed to just show the life and show the beauty. We shy away from it, but that's also where we see a lot of the learning, and those edges, those unknown spaces, that sort of question of what will survive, what won't survive, what should survive. It's challenging to look at and be part of.
And also getting over our fascination with more charismatic species and getting excited about the small and the weird and wonderful. I mean, on your project in Wales, I mean, what have you seen so far? Has there been anything? And have you? I'm intrigued to know how your early adopters. Sorry, just one sec. Camera's gone off. Sorry. I'm intrigued to know how your early adopters and customers are reacting to some of the things that you're finding, and whether you've had any interesting people coming to you and saying, I'm finding this stuff really interesting, I had no idea. I'm interested to know how that's going so far.
So one of the things I discovered early is, so my original idea was I'll take a camera app and I'll sort of like show the landscape and show that sort of thing. And I quickly discovered it's much better if I film myself talking about it, which I found very difficult. I don't like being on camera. I've learnt to sort of like tolerate it.
Yeah.
But it's even if people are really interested in rewilding and the ecology of it and the land and the wildness, it's much easier to relate to someone talking about it than just seeing it. So what I've learned is to find the things that are interesting to me and talk about it, and then that brings people in rather than just showing it. And that's really surprised me. I've found that people like it when it goes wrong, or
interesting.
Like things that I thought would work, and then I come back. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't work. So there's something. I think authenticity is overused, but I think there is something authentic about a wilder landscape because things do go wrong, and I think people value that as almost like as an escape, as being able to see here are some experiments, some of them work, some of them don't work, and seeing how those things go is really important. But yeah, I think finding what I'm passionate about when I'm there, what surprises me and interests me, helps a lot, and I think that connects up with people. And I found I've got interested in things that I was surprised about, like hoverflies. Hoverflies are amazing. There's so many different hoverflies. And they have the advantage that they tend to sit still for a bit, which is really very important quality as I'm trying to learn how to photograph and things like that. And then you sort of stumble across these species that then help you understand more widely what's going on. And so that's just lovely. But yeah, I think that's a big part of it, that I was surprised that I have to be a character in this business. And it's also what I discovered generally about creating a business is it's very personal, uncomfortably personal, and you can't sort of escape that. It's part of the reason I'm really impressed by what you're doing. I think it feels very naked.
Yeah.
Setting up your own business.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, I can relate to that. Absolutely. And I think it's taken me, part of the reason why I just launched into doing the podcast is like I need to just get better. I was the same, very introverted, just want to build things behind the scenes and never talk about them. And you realize very quickly that's in this day and age especially, I mean, maybe never, but I mean, there's the opportunities are there to be able to reach a wider audience, and so you just have to lean into it, because that was going to be, you posted something I was interested to dive into a bit more is on that point. It's moving into the ecopreneur side of things a bit more, because I do think your journey is interesting for the reasons that you described, and you're very honest about that, feeling a little bit uncomfortable in that space, but knowing you have to do it. And you posted that you're launching a social enterprise, and it meant that you need to become a social entrepreneur. So yeah, I'm intrigued to know a little bit more about what you mean by that and how you're finding that journey.
Yeah, it was at this social innovation program year here that I was on. It ended with me joining their sort of incubator, and then as part of that, they forced us to do a crowdbacker. Right. Definitely forced. There was no way I'd have done that crowdbacker if it wasn't part of the requirement. And that quote was from a speech that opened it, around saying you're not just launching yourself as you're not just launching a social enterprise, you're launching yourself as a social entrepreneur. And that's the bit that I hadn't realised, and the bit that I keep struggling with. It sort of reflects that this is now a commitment that you're making, but it's also a public commitment, very much underlined by something like a crowdbacker campaign, or in your example of doing it live on a podcast. There's no hiding. You have to tell everyone what you're doing. Even the people that you know will be sniggering about it, or at least in your head will be sort of like, oh my God, what an idiot, why is he doing that? And when you start out, those are the voices that you listen to, these imagined voices of people who will be looking down on you and laughing about it and so on, whether or not they exist. Is your audience in the beginning. It's very difficult to get past that as your audience. And then over time, you start to realise people firstly care, either because they care about you or they care about the business. And then over time, those are the people you're talking to. And you realise that's a much nicer, more comfortable space. And the idea then is, how do you grow that number of people? And because there are a lot of people out there, and again, they're either going to care about your business and what you're trying to do, or they care about you because you're a social entrepreneur, they're interested in social entrepreneurship, or they have some sort of like family duty or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you sort of get over that bit, and it took me a little while, once you get over that bit and you realise those are the people you're talking to, things become much easier. Well, it becomes much easier to say things in public. It's still very difficult to keep doing this, I think. I think in the beginning, you tend to think the idea is what's important. Like, you just need this really special, beautiful idea, and then
you
that's
put it into the world.
Difficult. Yeah.
and then
exactly. And then it's all done, solved. And actually, the idea is pretty much worthless. It doesn't really mean much. People get ideas all the time. What's difficult is the execution. And the execution is so much about persistence and just keeping on going and constantly having to make these little decisions that are draining.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you keep going through that and keep going through that? And when do you decide, I'm just going to keep on going, I just need to keep doing this again and again and again? Or, oh no, this is now the sign that I'm going to need to change and do something different. Like, that mess of things is exhausting and wonderful, and I think such a key part of being a social entrepreneur, and such a key part of learning about yourself around, okay, what are the qualities that I have that help this? What are the qualities that I have that are making this more difficult for myself? And how do I navigate a path through this when there isn't a boss? Or there is a boss, it's just your boss is you, and he's a bit of an idiot. So yeah, I think that bit of like, how do you learn to do this when there's the feedback that comes in is very random and very stochastic.
That's like, I was nodding along there because I can relate so much to so many of the things you said in the voices of doubt. I'm very bad still at one piece of bad feedback, or it might not even be that, just that what you perceive as something slightly negative can undo 10 good bits of feedback, and those really positive moments can seem to fade much quicker than the negative ones, which is we're finding constantly with what we're building with No Longer Node, is we keep having to remind ourselves of just how great some of the little milestones that have been, but then only takes one video we post which gets no views, and you think this idea is pointless. Absolutely. You think you've cracked it. It's like, oh wow, I know the formula now, and then you realise, oh no, I was just lucky. It's like, oh okay, that's a shame. I'm gonna have to start thinking it all through again, or do I just keep going? And it's back to that sort of circle of doubt. I think there's a quality that is it's really important in entrepreneurship, but it's really damaging around that thing around, if you hear negative feedback, you take it seriously, and if you hear positive feedback, you dismiss it. But it sort of gives you that drive to keep going. But it's how do you find that comfort within it? That's still, it's not soul destroying. It's actually invigorating, and I think that's like, I go back to that piece around, am I happy or frustrated by where I'm at the moment? On one side, this didn't exist at all 3 years ago, and now it's a living business. I have over 100 subscribers. I got a chunk of investment. So on that, it's like, wow, this is amazing. It's really good. But then again, when you apply for different things, you project your growth rate and stuff like that. And I'm like, against my projected theoretical growth rate, I'm nowhere close. It's like, oh wait, I should be at 1,000 by now. Why haven't I cracked this? Why haven't I done that? So it's sort of like this dance that you're constantly playing with yourself, and it's trying to find a way that you still enjoy that. I think sometimes you're not, and it's going to be a bit dark for a bit, and then you'll come out the other side, and it'll be okay again. Yeah, like, so you need to set targets, but then not being yourself up when those targets don't always get met. You kind of know in the back of your mind that they were set there just to keep you on track, but it's still tricky, isn't it, when you don't get to them? I've definitely been there.
Yeah, and also, and recognizing also to celebrate anything you can celebrate. I was talking to someone and realized that I hadn't celebrated getting to 100 subscribers.
Yeah,
I'd been like, oh yeah, it was later than I thought it would be. it took me longer than I thought. How am I going to get the next 100? And someone reminded me, like, you've just got up to 100 subscribers.
Yeah,
You need to
imagine them in
celebrate
a room. Imagine 100 people in a room. Like that's what when someone said that to me, I was talking about podcast listeners and, being a bit disappointed that podcasts have got a bit saturated. And I used to get tens of thousands of streams, and now I'm down in the hundreds to thousands. And it's like someone said, well, imagine if all those people were listening to you live in a room, you'd feel a bit different. And I think it's the same when I hear you say 100 subscribers, it's like, that's pretty amazing when you think of 100 people in a room, that have invested in the business. I think that's it suddenly hits home.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. And I guess you can are you applying the rewilding mindset to the way you're building the business in terms of that experimentation? When you were talking about it before around rewilding being this, you see what works, you test and you adapt. It feels very similar. It must be interesting to build a business in the rewilding space because you can apply that thinking to both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was challenged by someone that's mentoring me to really think about that. One of the things that we then talked about is, so the way that it works is that we have, I work on 3-acre projects. And the idea is it's a small enough project that can still make a difference for the people that we partner with. So our first project is partnered with the Wildlife Trust, but it's small enough that it can fill. So 3 acres is about 1,000 subscribers. And the idea is that once that fills, then that project becomes to some extent its own entity. So it has some sort of say over how it then is rewilded or what happens next and so on. No idea what that actually means or how it's going to work, but it's sort of like part of like, how can I grow the business so it takes on its own shape that is also more organic and has more life to it and is trying to be a little bit different and experimental. So yeah, trying to do things like that, but it is also exhausting. It's like trying to find ways of marketing that isn't the traditional marketing. Like it's just, having to think every little bit is exhausting. It'd be nice in some ways to just be doing a business in a relatively typical area where you have relatively typical benchmarks. You know what you should be doing. You know the path. So yeah, it's nice to be trying to do something completely different. But it does sometimes feel like you make it harder work for yourself than you need to. Yeah,
having to basically be the head of marketing, head of sales, head of everything. There's a lot to learn, and things are moving so fast. I have friends that work in those areas full time and in other businesses, and they, it's their full time job, and they're always talking about how things like social media are moving so quickly. So it's like, well, how is a founder meant to keep on top of all these things, and what course when you've got limited budget, do I do a course? Do I get a mentor? It's constant challenge, and I guess that's what. Then you start to think, well, do you look for funding, for example, which is also things like that, which is something I'm intrigued to dig into a little bit as well, and your thoughts around that. But I think before that, you've written, I think this is quite interesting in terms of not trying to convince everyone and getting comfortable with the fact that the goal isn't to reach everyone and to serve everyone. It's finding that audience, the 1,000 true fans. We've just talked about this on a podcast, on the Startup Diaries podcast, around that 1,000 true fans and not getting paralyzed by the fact that there's just so much opportunity, but the pros and cons of that. And also this point around, you wrote a really interesting article on your blog a little while ago about innovation and about H1, H2, H3. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, yeah.
Like finding your place in that. So those two things I'm intrigued to dig into. You might have to explain that one a little bit for listeners, but I found that, and I can link to the post in the description because I thought that was really interesting thinking.
Oh, thank you. When I set up the business, I imagined it going on a path that was, in the beginning, I'll be talking to people who know about and care about rewilding, and they'll get involved. And then I'll slowly spread out from there so that eventually I'm talking to people who feel like they're trapped in concrete, working in an office, know something about they like going for a walk but are not really that interested in nature, and eventually reaching those people and taking them on the path to rewilding is where I'm going to make the most impact. But I also find that side of it really tough. Like trying to persuade someone to care about species extinction or rewilding when they have no basis for it is really tough, if possible at all. And I don't think I'm the right person to do it. So some people are really good at that first bit. How do you get people to spark that interest? I don't think I am. And I came across this idea of three horizons framework, and it was through an organisation that I'm part of called the Bioleadership Fellowship. I'm sort of a learning addict. I keep finding myself in new communities and new learning situations, which is part of why I love doing this, because you're constantly learning.
Yeah.
They talked about the Three Horizons framework as applied to social enterprise. And the first horizon is the status quo. So what's happening at the moment, which will eventually fade. There is no status quo that doesn't fade eventually. So at some point that will fade. And there's this Horizon 3, which is the new emergent force that will become the status quo, but isn't there yet. And then there's Horizon 2, which is sort of a transitionary stage. So it's imperfect when looked at when you H3. It's quite radical when looked at for H1, but it's sort of an in-between stage that helps this third horizon come into being. And it can end up being co-opted by H1 and propping H1 up further. So it can take some of these things that initially can seem quite radical. Like, for example, Facebook back in the day felt like it was quite a radical thing. It was like, oh wow, now you can be friends with anyone. You can suddenly keep in contact with all the people you could never keep in contact because they were in different countries. This is going to transform friendship. Everyone's going to be able to see each other. Connected to all these people all across the world. Their problems will be your problems. It will bring about harmony and world peace and all of this. Like, genuinely, there are ideas like that could have been a possibility. And then quite quickly you see that co-opted into H1, and actually it's darker and just makes things worse and props up these things. And so there's these. So I was thinking about that in terms of something like rewilding. So what are the things that bring rewilding into the mainstream? Not just to prop up the mainstream, but subvert it. And how do I think about that? And that then helped me think about, well, actually, part of what I'm doing, I think, is giving space, voice, support, encouragement to the people that are able and are thinking about how do we create a new world? How do we create a wilder world? How do we make that part of our lives again? And even if I just stay in that space, then that is something that's worthwhile doing and worthwhile doing. So it's not necessarily about me stepping out to the people trapped in concrete. It's providing that sustenance and possibility to the people who are doing the work. So I was sort of struck by that, and that made me feel more comfortable about maybe actually the way I should be building is supporting people who are interested in these ideas of rewilding, of wildness and nature connection, and not worrying too much about bringing more people into that space. That is for someone else.
Got you. And in terms of, it's really interesting what you say around things just propping up the system as it is. I mean, like, it's something I wrestle with a lot of the time in terms of thinking about how we tackle these things and how possible it is within existing systems. How are you thinking about that? And you mentioned the VC thing, and I know you've talked about the pros and cons of accepting funding. And as we said before, the big pro is that you can start to scale and you get the finance to do things that maybe you couldn't before. But we definitely need to be cautious about what that comes with. So interested to know how you're currently thinking about that, and where you think the limitations are for people listening. Maybe it's not all this. There seems to be sometimes in the entrepreneur space, this just like that seems to be almost the end point. It's like getting that funding, like getting that is like that's the goal, and
there's this really weird thing. It feels like in entrepreneurship where the aim is to exit. And I don't understand that. Like starting an idea in a business with the aim of leaving it it's just a really strange mindset.
Like people who have kids and then talk about how they can't wait for them to leave home for the whole time.
I mean, definitely that comes up occasionally, but not as the main reason. Like, I'm having children so I can create another entrance into university.
Exactly.
It's really weird. And I think it's almost like entrepreneurship in some settings is a sort of pop star equivalent of business. So, like people look down on these children who want to become pop stars or footballers as hopelessly naive because, only 1 in a million will actually succeed and it's so much luck and so on.
Mm.
But a lot of entrepreneurs seem to be doing that, as in, like, if you're going into entrepreneurship for the money, then really, like, please think about something else. It's not good for you and it's not good for anyone else. It is a bad way to make money.
There's plenty of easy ways to make a quick buck out there.
Exactly. It's something that is so filled, like football and like pop stars. You just see the success stories. So you see all these sort of like really prominent people that's made millions and been really successful, and you think, oh well, okay, that's possible. And you don't see the stories of all the people that sort of like fall to the wayside. And yeah, there's a weird thing in people who are more business minded where they can see that's really obvious if in football or pop stars, but they can't see it's obvious in entrepreneurship. So if you're not doing what you love, then yeah, don't do it. Sorry, I've gone off on a rant and I've forgotten what you asked me.
Yeah, on the venture capital.
Oh yes,
idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really lucky. I have funding from what I genuinely believe to be a impact-focused VC called Bethnal Green Ventures.
Oh yeah. I know the name. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to apply to them because they were a VC. But then I got on a call with someone from them and told them I didn't like VCs or the idea of VCs.
I love that. Honestly, straight away.
And she understood and said apply anyway. And then I got through to the interview and I said the same thing I'm not sure why I felt that was a good idea. But anyway, they were like, okay, we'll see how it goes. I think this is interesting. And I think what they liked about me is that the business is very much in lockstep with impact and profit. They're very much tied together. Mm. And so that's been wonderful. And like I have £60,000 from them, which in a scale of entrepreneurship is nothing. In the scale of my business, it's massive. It's transformational.
For a solopreneur, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so it gives me a lot of space to experiment and keep going. And it gives me validation, like someone like them sees value in the business. I am at this stage not interested in then doing follow-up funding. I think that stepping stone that you then start feels to me corrosive, where you raise money to raise more money to raise more money, and by the end of it, you don't have your business and you have a whole load of expectations to make money. Yeah, and
whatever means. Yeah, so change the business model potentially to which is scary.
Exactly, and the conversations around how you're going to get to 1 million subscribers, how you're going to get to like multinational, and it's like I don't know. Like I don't want to think in that term. I want to work out how do I get to 1,000. 1,000 is still huge for me. Yeah. Like being able to complete this project, and once I've completed this project, then I feel like I'll know more. Like, okay, is there 10,000 people out there, or is it just 1,000? Does it actually then work? How does that then turn into its own thing, and what makes sense? Mm. What are the ways of bringing in new subscribers, and is it working for them? So are the subscribers that I'm bringing in, are they genuinely feeling more connected to this? There's too many questions there for me to want to go, okay, now I'm just going to start to build my team, work out how we get to 1 million and so on. And I feel that side of it is a trap that I don't want to go near. Mm-hmm. But I completely understand why some other people take that route, either because of their business model. Like I'm lucky in my business model that I get to some sort of profitability, whether I'm including paying myself or not, which I probably should think about at some point. But I could get to sort of like basic profitability at around 600, 700 subscribers. Mm. So my route to profitability is relatively low. Really low if in comparison to a lot of businesses.
You don't have to build like a huge piece of infrastructure or something, for example. So exactly. Yeah, that makes it interesting, exciting.
Yeah. So I'm in a very lucky position, and also I'm in a very lucky position, full stop, to be able to choose this path. My wife works and is supportive to an extent, and I have enough financial means where this is a risk, but I'm not going to bankrupt myself and my family, which is already a really lucky position to be in. Mm. Yeah, so I am choosing because I have a choice. A lot of people who are building don't have that choice, and they have to go down that route because that's the route that's available.
Yeah, and you hinted to it earlier, this having a learning mindset and being quite handy that you already have that clearly. But for me, when I'm building a business, it's yes, I want it to work financially, but every day I remind myself, think of all the things that you've learned that you could apply to And that always jumps out to me around the number of failed businesses, it is huge. But I think the stat that I would love to hear, and that I don't know if it's out there, is how many of those founders then went on to do another thing that was slightly different, but then they hit something that worked there. I think that's something that I've thought about quite a lot. It's easy to say whatever it is, 90% of startups fail, but it's like, yeah, but of that 90%, how many went on to build something else? So yeah.
I think taking it into a wilder context again, like 90% of the saplings I plant, let alone maybe it's not quite as high for other people who are more accomplished.
Well, I mean, with the weather we've been having, that's probably quite decent.
Yeah, so 90% of the saplings I plant fail. Does that mean that they were a failure and it's worthless? No, that now is food for other things. It's done something into the soil. It's helped me learn. It's helped develop. Like, a lot of things in life don't survive, and that starts to be a source of other life and other things. I think one of the things that we're missing is, how do businesses die? Like, what is the best way for them to die, and how do they do so in a way that then brings life to the wider piece? We've ended up in a situation where we have a lot of zombie businesses that are just corrosive and have no possibility of death, and it's just like, okay, this is unnatural and is causing damage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think, if this business fails, which I hope it doesn't, but I mean, inevitably at some point it will. It's not going to go on forever. Firstly, it's creating good in itself as it goes.
Exactly.
But also it has the potential to create good as some sort of spillover effect, hopefully into me, but into other people as well.
Agreed. Yeah, it's not just it's the whoever you can impact along the way. Either way, it still has an impact. So I'm completely with you. Conscious of time, I want to get on to my final 3 questions, which I hope you've had time to have a little think about. But yeah, thanks again in advance of those, Jon, for this conversation. There's loads of stuff I'm sure we could get into about. Sorry, my camera keeps going to sleep. There's loads of stuff we could get into on all this stuff. It's fascinating, and I think so many parallels, I'm sure, with other founders out there listening, or people that are thinking about taking that leap into entrepreneurship. I think just the thing that was going through my head there when you were talking about your building small and growing out is this sense that I definitely feel is a longing for a community again. And that is difficult to do on a big scale. And I think that is actually what's really powerful about starting slightly smaller is, I need to sign up to the to Wild Mosaic, but just the thought of being a part of 100 people or 1,000 people, you said, to get to like that, have that connection to a project is like that. Makes me clearly connects with something that's lacking in a lot of us, is like being part of something that has an impact. So that, I think, is something that I think could be a real focus for, I'm sure it's already in your mind, but in terms of what you could do with Wild Mosaic and getting people together and having that connection, I can see endless possibilities in terms of how you could use that to build the next project and things. So yeah,
thank you. I think part of the challenge is there's the ideas. How do you sort of, it's like you need the ideas in sort of like in a special pen where you get to sort of like cultivate them but have them wait their time a bit. But yeah, the community side of it, I really want to get into that. I'm not there yet, but yeah, I think, because as you say, it has that real potential. Suddenly you are connected to other rewilders across the UK.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, all these people have this sense of purpose, all tied to one particular spot of land. And yeah, I really want to play with that idea. My first step in it is I want to do twinning. I want to say that a subscriber then has a tile in the Wales project, but also chooses a tile for themselves where they are, whether it's a garden or a walk they go on.
Love that.
And then sort of play with this idea of land in one place and another place, being able to watch that and have that sort of like relationship with it, and then see what if you put all of those different pieces together, how would that look? So yeah, definitely the idea of community is really important.
Yeah, that was just my little insight. We can obviously chat about it outside the podcast. I feel like that's the super, like, for me as an ecologist and someone working in this space, we often reach for the metrics and the business case for why it's important. But I actually think the power is that being a part of something bigger. And to be honest, to me, if I was when I'm a subscriber. I think it'll be, yeah. I'll as long as I've got a trust that something's happening and interesting things are happening, then the data that comes out of it is. I'm a bit interested because I'm a nerd, but I imagine a majority of people, like I just want to be part of something that is changing and is becoming better. And if that happens slower than planned or quicker than planned, then it doesn't matter. It's happening.
I think you're right, and I think that sense of community and movement is important. I think the other thing is, with metrics, like in Wales anyway, we're restoring sheep pasture. If we're not improving biodiversity on that, I don't know.
That's it. The baseline's so low.
Exactly. It's just if things aren't improving, then we're doing something very wrong. We're probably concreting over the place. It's even that might do better than sheep pasture. Sorry, heavily intensively grazed sheep pasture. There are ways. In theory, I've heard, but I've never seen it in practice, that sheep can not be destructive for biodiversity.
That's a whole podcast in itself. Yeah, I'm with you on that. They can. Yeah, in some situations, can
there is
be.
A theoretical
Anyway, that would be a whole topic. Brilliant. Well, thanks again, John. And I'm conscious of time, so I want to get on to my three final questions. I'm not sure if do you have to hard stop at 12?
No, I'm good.
Cool. I've got a little bit of a buffer, so sorry if we overrun a little bit. I always want to try and stick to people's diaries, busy founders' diaries. Yeah. So the three questions I've been asking since the start, asking all my guests are these. I always mix up the order, but I'll go with the book recommendation first of all. And I'm broadening this because a couple of recent guests have gone for films and podcasts and things, so it doesn't have to be a book, but something that is maybe you've read in the past or that's on your bookshelf currently that you'd like to recommend to either people that are interested in the rewilding side of things, or maybe on the business side of things, or maybe it could be the philosophical side of things. I didn't realize you had a background in philosophy, but it makes sense reading some of your thinking.
Yes, over elaborating on particular meaningless points. Yes.
Nah.
The book that I keep coming back to that's affected me the most over the last 3 years is Jenny Odell and How to Do Nothing. She is brilliant, and the book is brilliant. On the surface, it's about resisting our pulls through the attention economy, but it's actually a lot about how do you reconnect to wildness and why that's so important in people's lives. And part of it is that unpredictability and that wonder, and so much of that gets taken away from us by being sucked into the attention economy. So yeah, I've read that twice, listened to it in audiobook, and then immediately read it as a book, and it reminds me I want to go and read it again. It's a wonderful book, and it's beautiful.
Is it read, one of the audiobooks? Is it read by the author? Is it? Would you recommend if I'm going to? I've not read it, so I'm interested. These days, my reading time is slightly. I do try and read still, but audiobooks in a car journey tend to be more accessible. So
it's a good audiobook. Yeah, I didn't then read it because because the audiobook was rubbish. I read it because it worked and it was good. Yeah, so it's definitely, because I find the same. I would love to get back into the habit of reading. Whenever I try, I fail, but I listen to audiobooks all the time.
Yeah, amazing. I'll leave that in the show notes, and I'm definitely going to check that one out. My second question is the billboard question, which is if you could leave a quote on a billboard in your nearest large town or city to get a message out to the public, do you have a quote in mind? It can be your quote or it can be attributed to someone. Yeah.
So my slightly facetious and contrarian nature would say I would love just to have "slow down" put on a billboard as a practical thing.
Yeah.
The amount of urgency that seems to be in people driving cars is it seems to be like the moment you step into a car, suddenly that urgency comes in where every second is vitally important and more important than anyone else around.
Yeah.
So the slightly facetious thing of just saying "slow down."
I love that. Yeah.
But I think there is a wider thing, and maybe it is slow down, pay attention, go for a walk. I was asked recently what one thing I would recommend for rewilding, and I think it would be to go for a walk. I think that's the most powerful starting rewilding action you can do, is go for a walk, preferably in the woods, and pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And walk slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Those things together are surprisingly powerful. So I think it would be slow down, maybe with some smaller prints that would talk about woods and walking slowly.
Yeah. and just noticing the change in the big thing for me, and sometimes it makes life feel like it's going even quicker, but the changing of the seasons, going to a woodland and seeing how it changes over the year, that like really feels like it reconnects with something.
Yeah, it always makes spring go so
It
fast.
does, it really does. Like wild garlic, oh, it's gone.
Yeah, yeah. It's like spring has so many distinct phases, which I'd never noticed before. And it's just like, yeah, there's the early spring, then the middle spring, and then late spring, and yeah, it rushes past, and it all goes too quick to fully enjoy.
Brilliant, I love that. And yeah, slow down would work, or that we'll take the small print as well.
Yeah, I realise also I speak too quickly, and I apologise. I've been talking too quickly. I should have that written on a post-it note in front of me.
I actually used to have talk slower written for this podcast, written in big letters on a post-it, and it's not there anymore. And I have the same thing. Don't worry. And I don't think, yeah, I think you're perfectly fine. Final question is in the interests of growing this ecopreneur community, and the building businesses in this space can be a really good proactive way to tackle eco anxiety and to also make a change. I've been asking guests to share if they've got any business ideas they've had that they've just never got around to. I don't know if you're like this, if you have a list that you've been making. I think most people I've spoken to, most founders I've spoken to, have had at least a few that they've jotted down. So yeah, I mean, did you have any?
Yeah, it's a problem. I don't think it should be encouraged.
No, that's
I
why
think
that's why I started this bit, because I was like, people need to just start
yeah,
sharing them, stop hoarding
expressive.
them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's that challenge thing as well, because you get into entrepreneurship because you have this exciting idea,
Yeah,
and then it's like, okay, now I need you to stick to that idea and not have other ones.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The idea that I would love to see in the world is a vegan fast food chain.
Mm,
I don't know why it doesn't exist already. Vegan food should be cheaper. There's a lot of structural reasons why it isn't, but nevertheless, it should be really possible to have a cheap fast food chain. Most of the rest of the world does it. There's many parts of the world that are vegan and have cheap, affordable fast food. It just needs to also exist alongside the McDonald's and so ons of this world. I'm not vegan, but I used to be vegan. I am always trying to cut down on meat. It's one of the things that I found oddly difficult since becoming a parent.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I would just love there to be a fast food vegan place that it's not big on the vegan. It's just
It's
because it's
just
cheaper, easier,
yeah,
tastier, and so on.
yeah. I love that. I think that's because everyone's always, the argument is always, well, it shouldn't be fast food, it should be a premium. We should be convincing people that we should be paying more for food, but there's this whole point of meeting people where they're at, as you alluded to earlier, like, and as we're trying to do through what we're doing, it's like there's a grey area where maybe it is interesting to just play in that space and try and convince people from where they're already at, rather than going, no, you should be going to a deli and paying £6 for a
Yeah,
sandwich, and if you can't afford that, then you
yeah.
should just like, yeah,
I think it's a problem. Like that, there is a lot for good reason that ends up being middle class sustainability.
yeah,
It's the easiest way for a lot of businesses to engage with sustainability. They put in a slightly more expensive line of whatever they're doing and pitch it to a middle class, relatively affluent audience. And I think we're past that stage now. We have to do something a bit more radical. That thing, like, I mean, there's some great vegan restaurants where you sit down, you pay more, and so on. But I'm so sick of going into restaurants and the vegan option is the same price or more expensive than all the
yeah,
other options.
yeah,
And it's just like, well, you could create fast food with flour and water, and you have a huge range of food already just with that. So yeah, you could still pay suppliers more. You could still pay them a better thing than they get now, and come up with food that is cheap, affordable, and tasty. I'm just shocked
nice.
it hasn't happened yet.
I know. It feels like the world is ready now for that, and someone needs to go and build that. And if they aren't already, yeah, thanks for that, John. That's a great one. Yeah, anyone listening who is thinking wants to get into this but hasn't got an idea, I think that could be an interesting challenge. But definitely, there's got to be a market for it, and it's needed. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, the other one related to that is even had the name where you call it glut, like where you
Mm.
end up with an excess. So you end up with a particular great season of something, and so there's just no demand for it. So you then take those and you do something with them, turn them all into batches of soup, or just freeze it into later or whatever. Because but anyway, yes. Sorry, I could go on.
Food waste and things. There's just so much opportunity there. from a purely business perspective of just free stuff or cheap stuff, that it just seems crazy sometimes that those dots haven't been joined. But we're getting there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks very much, Jon. And it's been really interesting chatting to you. I knew it would be a fun conversation. Before we go, any places you want to, I'll obviously leave a link to Wild Mosaic in the description, but any other calls to action for the audience or anything else you want to leave us with?
Yeah, no, it would be lovely if you had a look at my website and checked out what I'm doing. Yeah, and ping me an email. Tell me why you do like it or don't like it. I'm Jonn at wildmosaic.eco. And yeah, take the time to go for a slow walk.
Thanks, Jon.
Awesome. Thank you.
So that is it for another episode of the Innovate Eco podcast. I hope you enjoyed that chat as much as I did with Jon and found those insights insightful too. Please do leave your comments in whatever platform you're on, whether that's on YouTube or Spotify. I'd love to hear what you thought of that and of everything else we're doing. It's always lovely to hear that feedback. Please do reach out if you want to. It's hello@innovate-eco.com if you would like to be on the podcast in the future, or if you've got ideas for guests as well. Always love to hear those. And as I said at the start, if you want to find out more about the business I'm now building and see and follow along there, then you can listen to the Startup Diaries podcast, which is in the Innovate Eco feed, or you can go to nolongerknown.com where you can read about what we're building too and do follow along on all the social channels and stuff. I'm also launching a newsletter called the Ecopreneur Collective, where I'm going to be kind of using it as a bit of a diary and a way to share thoughts and ideas as I'm working on that business. And I'd love for it to become eventually a collaborative effort, hence the name Collective, and get other people contributing and writing and building this community with the founders that I've already had on or other founders out there, so we can all share lessons from the interesting to maybe even the slightly more mundane elements of building a business, but hopefully it will bring a collective energy, because I know already from building what I'm building or trying to build it, it can feel like a little bit lonely at times, and having that support from a kind of collective group I think will be really helpful anyway. So I'm going to start that. So if you want to, I'll leave a link in the description. It's called the Ecopreneur Collective and it'll be on Substack initially, and we'll see where it goes. But yeah, thanks again for listening. Really do appreciate it. Hopefully you'll be back for a future episode in a couple of weeks' time. See you soon.